finding a quiet place and counting to 1,000. People say, well, what's the big deal about that? It's harder than you think. The idea is to count to 1,000 without being distracted. That means your mind is focusing on this alone. Well, hello and Happy New Year, and welcome to another year of the Ronin Leadership Podcast. This is Mike Howard. It is 30 January, and I hope all of you had a great holiday season, Christmas season, New Year's, all that good stuff. And I know that our family, we had a great time. We went to North Carolina, Janice, Kiku, and I, to visit our grandkids and our daughter and son-in-law in North Carolina, and that was great. Had a great time. And usually we go on Thanksgiving, but this year we went at Christmas. Very festive atmosphere. I mean, I even got into it by wearing Christmas pajamas, which I never do, right? But the family has changed me a little bit. You know, not only did I dress like Jafar at Disney World, but I just sort of like a pirate on the Disney cruise, and now I'm wearing Christmas pajamas, so I can adapt to different environments. And just kind of took a bit of a hiatus. I've been involved with some other things. Was able to talk to, actually in December, I had a great opportunity to go to the FBI Academy in Quantico, Virginia. It's been a few years since I've been there, and they had a leadership seminar that had been taking place that week, which included a lot of chief security officers, directors of security. A couple of my dear friends and colleagues were there in the security industry monitoring the course, and some FBI personnel. So it was really great to speak to them on leadership, my leadership journey, Ronin Leadership, and that was a great opportunity. Really nice to get out there and also observe some of the FBI agents in training, these men and women that are going to be training to risk their lives to protect our country. So that was awesome. And then, you know, the start of the new year, just been busy with a lot of things. Before I get started on the topic for the first topic of the year, I want to thank all of you for really supporting me both in my podcast efforts and on LinkedIn on the blog efforts. Before we started the podcast, I told Janice that the latest statistics are on the Ronin Leadership Thoughts blog. We now have 1,866 subscribers, so that's awesome. We try to put some good content out there that helps to at least helps to support what we're doing here on the podcast. And right now we have a little over 1,300 subscribers to the podcast. So first of all, thank you. Second of all, continue to tell your friends and your family, acquaintances about the podcast and what it's all about, and promote it, please, if you can, in social media or just verbally. Continue to hit the like button, the subscribe button, and obviously share this content. We love it when we know that people are sharing this content, because that's how people find out about it. That's one way anyway, and that's why our subscribership is growing. So thank you very much. Also, in December, I was able to publish my second fiction novel, the second in the Jack Trench series, Blood Promise. As you can see, it's a little bit longer than the first one that I put out, Full Circle, but I've gotten some very good feedback on that, getting some good reviews on Amazon. Encourage you to read it. Encourage you to put a review on Amazon, because every little review helps. And so I thank you so much. And also, I found out I was able to work with the CIA back in our old headquarters in Langley, Virginia. And so both my first Jack Trench novel, Full Circle, which I also ask you to purchase if you haven't purchased a copy already. It's also out on Audible. So we're slowly getting our books in Audible, because I know a lot of people like to listen to their books. So go on Amazon.com or Audible, and you'll be able to get this, and so you can listen to it. But this book, as well as my first book, The Art of Ronin Leadership, Both of these are going to be at the CIA store. They call it the Employee Activity Association store. So I'm very proud that both of these books are going to be featured there. And then lastly, I don't want this to be a stepchild, but my second leadership book, The Art of Executing Ronin Leadership Strategies, is out there. It's more of a how-to book based on the comments that you gave me after I wrote The Art of Ronin Leadership, about how to build teams and how to build a budget, how to get C-suite support and backing for your strategic initiatives. So these two together, I think, will be a really good addition, not just to your library, but if you are a leader, get these for you and your team, and I think you'll get a lot out of them. But mostly I want to thank all of you for supporting my writing. I will be starting in February in earnest, writing the third of the Jack Trench novels called Omega Deception. You'll be able to find the first chapter of that at the end of Blood Promise. So, what do I want to talk about today? Well, I guess it started probably in the middle of last year, along with, studying the Bible on a daily basis and just getting some God in me, so that helps me throughout the day and in my life. I really started studying Stoicism. And, first of all, the word Stoic, right? It conjures up a person that is emotionless, unfeeling, unflappable maybe, but in the midst of whatever is going on in the world, you just maintain the kind of a stone face and kind of like this, I don't care, I'm inwardly. And nothing could be farther from the truth. The more I've delved into Stoicism, I realized that the idea of being a Stoic is not that. The idea of being a Stoic is being able to control your emotions, your thoughts, and your reactions while still staying engaged in a very chaotic world. I found out recently that there was another branch of philosophy called, Epicureanism. Of course, for me, Epicureanism is like eating, but basically those were the ones that were mostly inward. It was all about their inward and personality and growing themselves philosophically, but staying disengaged from the world. But Stoicism is completely opposite, which I like because we live in the real world. We don't live on a mountaintop where we can just study philosophy 24/7 and not worry about traffic, crime, wars around the world, economy, bad or good, health issues, people dying, friends, all the things that are part of life. And there are a lot of great parts of life, but these are parts of life that obviously we're part of and we have to deal with. And so the more I started listening to this guy named Ryan Holiday, and we'll have his link up here on the podcast. But a lot of you may have heard of him because I've posted a lot, probably in the last 4 months on Ryan. But he's kind of the guru of Stoicism. He, at the age of 19, he picked up a book called Meditations by Marcus Aurelius, who was a Roman emperor who took over at a time that was very chaotic in ancient Rome. There were wars to be fought. There were political battles to be fought. They were dealing with a huge plague. And he kept a journal, and he called it his Meditations. And it was never meant to be published. I mean, he did this for himself, whether it was in the evening or in the morning, he journaled. And it was all about getting his thoughts about life, about how he's dealing with life, whether that day he dealt with it in a good way or whether he dealt with it in a way that he thought was less than stellar, and what could he do about it. And over a period of time, this came up with this Meditations, which is really kind of the Bible. I mean, there are many other tomes, as they call it, books by Seneca and also by Epictetus. I believe that's how you say it. But he seems to be the one that people tend to gravitate to. And I remember a good friend of mine, Chuck Randolph, who a lot of you in the security industry know, back in the day gave me he signed a copy of Meditations. And I've had it with me for many, many years. And I read it back in the day, and I thought it was great. But it didn't strike me. But somehow it's weird in retirement when I don't necessarily have the daily stresses and strains of running an enterprise and being chief security officer with everything that all of you know who are working and still in an enterprise or business every day are dealing with. I just got, maybe it's because I had more time, but I just started delving more into it. And I really liked what I was reading. And so the more I read about it, the more I realized that I could apply this. All of us can apply these basic concepts to our lives. And the more I read, and there's a thing called the Daily Stoic that I get this email every day. And at the beginning of this year, I started using a Daily Stoic journal, which talks about, it gives you a prompt, and it tells you about what are the things you can't control today, and so that you jot that down, and then in the evening there's a reflection. How did that work for you? Did it make you? And so it helps you just think about different things. A good friend of mine, Joel Bonilla, who is one of the managers at the Omega Boutique at the Bellagio here in Las Vegas, is also really into, if you want to say it, into Stoicism, but he's been studying it hard. And he gave me a really good daily Stoic edition for Christmas, which I cherish and which I read every day. And so one of the things you learn from Marcus Aurelius, besides some of the things I'm going to get into, is the idea of journaling. Now, I really hadn't journaled to any great extent. There was always, every year there was always this, I'm going to do it, but I didn't do it. But after, being a devotee of Stoicism for a while now, I realize how important journaling is. Now, whether you do it in a digital format and whether you do it on paper, and I actually do both. There are several journals that I use, and I'm also going to provide the links to those here in this podcast. There's the Apple, it's just called Journal, and to me that's more of a fun kind of thing that if you go to dinners, or if you're hanging out with friends and families, or you're at home, whatever it is, you take pictures, videos, you can write things, and it just kind of helps chronicle good things that are happening in your day. There's another one called Day One, and Day One is, to me, the one that I really use it's more like the meditations part of it. It's really about what the day is going to be like. What are my thoughts about that particular day? Are there certain things that I'm dealing with that I need to steel myself for, or are there is there some anxiety about something that I need to think about and understand what's driving that so that I can handle that? And so I use Day One for that. But obviously, as I said earlier, I still use the Daily Stoic Journal, and I write every morning and every evening. I have other things too. There's a thing called Our Daily Bread, which my wife and I listen to or read every day, where we get a little bit of the Word to get us ready for the day. And no matter how much I'm into Stoicism, the Bible and Christianity will still be always number one. But I think Stoicism I think they learned a lot from Christianity, and I think there is a lot of symbiotic relationships between the two. But really got into journaling big time this year, and I'm enjoying it. Yeah, I think it's great. It doesn't have to take a lot of time, but the idea is to get some thoughts on paper so that as you look at them and you say, okay, those are my thoughts about the day, or those are my thoughts about the day ahead, or these are my thoughts about what happened during this day. It'll help you think about, did you handle this situation as well as you could? Are there things you could have done better? How about tomorrow? What's coming up tomorrow? Are there things that you can now ready yourself for because of the lessons you learned today? And so it's really good. It's basically a dialogue with yourself. It's not meant for anybody else to look at. You can certainly share it with anybody you want to, but it's really for your self-improvement. And I love it. I'm really enjoying it. I look forward to it. And that also goes along with the fact that one of the things I also started doing probably around September-ish, is I started, after researching it, this whole idea of cold water exposure to build resilience, as well as some other health benefits. And if you follow me on Facebook or LinkedIn or Instagram, you know all about this. I started off with cold showers. I read about how a cold shower or a cold plunge, what it does to your body, right? There's a shock effect first, and then, and I did a podcast about this or touched on it recently. And then as you settle in, the cold water's still cold. Your body is still fighting it because your body doesn't like cold. It likes the warm water. So do I. But eventually you control your breathing, you control your thoughts. You're not thinking about that meeting that you don't want to go to. You're not thinking about that personnel issue you're dealing with. You're not thinking about budget or Ukraine or whatever the elections. You're just thinking about you getting in within yourself and breathing. And over a period of time, you build up a tolerance. There's always that initial shock. And I went from cold showers, started it probably at, half a minute. Eventually went to 5 minutes, which I do now, but then into cold plunging. And luckily, our outside spa, because the temperature right now in Las Vegas is still cold enough, anywhere between, depends on the day, 35 to 45 to 48 degrees. I can get in there and cold plunge. And the first time was holy crap. It was probably no more than a minute or so, even after the cold showers. But I learned to, cover my hands and my feet as long as the rest of your body is experiencing the cold. And now I'm up to 5 minutes. I can do a lot more if I wanted to. 5 minutes is the sweet spot. And the reason I mention this is not only because it's good for you. There are all kinds of effects, and I'm not going to get into it because this is not a cold plunge podcast. You look it up yourself. Look up Andrew Huberman on YouTube. He's, I believe, out of Stanford. And he's kind of the guru on the positive effects of cold plunging. And so, you also see on YouTube, like Mark Wahlberg's always doing his cold plunge. But I would go to Andrew Huberman because Wahlberg's doing it for Wahlberg. But go to Huberman because he gives you the science behind it. And the reason I mention this is that as I started cold plunging and then really getting into Stoicism, then this Ryan Holiday every year, at the beginning of the year, in January, starts out with a 21-day Stoicism challenge. I had never done it. I had heard about it, but I'd never done it. And it's 21 days of different challenges, mentally, sometimes physically, a lot of times emotionally, to try to, emphasize some of the precepts of Stoicism, which I'll get into in a second. And then it also helps you certainly build resilience and gives you a bit of a discipline, right? And I already started incorporating a routine in the last 3 or 4 months. When I started thinking about cold plunging, and I started reading also about there are a couple things. Number one, I used to always get up out of bed and take a look at my phone, right? Well, that's something I don't do anymore because I've read about it, and it's a natural reaction for all of us, especially if you're still in business. You want to look and see what's going on during the day, but that kind of gets your mind all messed up, right? That's why, in fact, I was talking to Janice and I had dinner with a businessman yesterday in Las Vegas, and he goes to work out in the morning. He doesn't look at his phone for the first hour and a half of his day. So that's the concept. So first of all, that's the first thing I started doing. I started putting my phone away at 10 o'clock at night, and I didn't look at it anymore. And then in the morning, I wouldn't look at it for email and all that other kind of stuff. There's another reason I use it, and I'll tell you about that as part of the routine. Then I started my day before I got out of bed with prayer, because I want to get my mind right, my soul right, my spirit right with God. And we do our daily bread together so that we have a little bit of devotional time together, the two of us. And then I do either a cold shower or a cold plunge. I like the cold plunge better only because this Huberman also talks about the beneficial effects of 5 minutes of morning sun, up to 5 minutes of morning sun. If you get that morning sun in your eyes, there's something about it that affects your circadian rhythms. And I'm not a scientist, but I know enough about it to know that it helps regulate your awakening and your sleeping, kind of let your body know at a certain period of time at night, hey, it's time to go to sleep, and maybe you start winding down for the day. So I'm able to cold plunge, look in the direction of the sun at the same time, and get both benefits. Then I finish that, and after the shower, shaving, brushing the teeth, and all that other kind of stuff, as I'm brewing coffee, I may go out and get another extra 5 minutes of sun, but I'll certainly journal in my daily Stoic Journal. I'll read the daily passage from there's a daily Stoicism, which every day it's like if you do Bible devotionals, every day there's something new, or every day there's something else. I read that, and then I may look at my mail or something else, or we may just head on out to do F45 workout and come back, and then I'll look at my mail. So that's kind of been my routine. So that was really great. So then you go back to this 21-day challenge, and besides the 21 days, you get 2 live Q&A sessions with Ryan Holiday to answer your questions. So I signed up for the challenge, and wow, it was really great. I'm going to do it every year, and I may do it on my own later on in the year, maybe the second half of the year. It really made an impact. But I remember one of the very first challenges, almost like a pre-challenge, right? The pre-challenge was to take a cold plunge, believe it or not. Holiday talked about how some philosophers back in the day, to start their new year, would jump into the local river. Maybe the Tiberias or whatever it was, but they jumped into the local river, ice cold, to start the year, to kind of push themselves up for the year. I'd already been doing that, so that meant nothing to me. I went ahead and did it, and it was great. But I think for a lot of people who are starting this challenge, who have never done that, that's a huge challenge. And whether you go in for 15 seconds or 30 seconds, or if you can last longer than that, that's not the idea. Time is not the idea. The idea is getting your mind right, overcoming your body's natural aversion and your fear of cold and what's going to do to you, and just get in there and do it. It starts to build resilience. So then you started the 21-day challenge. I'm not going to go through all 21. I just picked out a few snippets. One of the first things they did was get your desk in order, right? And part of that is similar to what I've talked about before with, you remember I mentioned Admiral Bill McRaven and his book, First Make Your Bed. Remember, as a reminder for those of you who don't remember the Admiral, he's retired now, was, I think, Chancellor of University of Texas, his alma mater at one point. But he wrote a book called First Make Your Bed. And the whole idea was, when he was a young Navy SEAL going through basic underwater demolition SEAL training, as he puts it, we were there because we want to be badass commandos and kill bad guys and stuff like that, which is cool. That's fine. And then the first thing they had to do was make their bed, and had to make it correctly. And it wasn't so much the fact that you're making the bed, it's the fact that you did something, as he said. If everything else turned to crap that day, you accomplished something. It's a psychological thing. You accomplished one thing, you made your bed. And this is kind of a similar thing. The first one was get your desk in order. I have to look at that. What? And so back at Microsoft, I used to be fairly anal about my desk being clear. I had 4 monitors, and I tried to keep my desk fairly clear. At times it was even Spartan, but then other times I would add pictures and stuff like that. But that's pretty good. And when I looked at my desk, it wasn't terrible, but I had crap all over the place. I had a lot of wires and a lot of stuff, and I looked at it. Yeah, it did look kind of crappy. So got my desk in order. It was similar to the Marie Kondo thing. Those of you who know of, have heard of Marie Kondo, a Japanese woman, a couple years ago had a Netflix series which you should watch, and it was all about going into people's homes where they needed to declutter and get their lives in order. I mean, if you've never done this, the psychological effect of having a clean house, a clean closet, and getting rid of extraneous clothes and things like that, it has a great effect on your mood and its sense of accomplishment. And so, as the challenge talked about, it's similar to that. So I did. That's the first thing I did was I looked what things. Marie Kondo with clothes, it always says what things bring you joy, what things don't bring you joy, and the ones that don't bring you joy, you toss them. And so that was kind of like I looked around my desk. My desk has memorabilia and things that mean a lot to me, but I didn't want it to have clutter. So I first got rid of all the crap off my desk, decided what I want to stay in there. But then also I went into files. I had different files, and they weren't always kept up to date. So I purged a lot of that, and then that was really great. That for day number one, that was really great. And when I looked back at my desk after I walked away, I thought, wow, that looks really cool. Looks great. Sense of accomplishment. As I said, there are also physical challenges. One of them was very interesting. Ryan Holiday talks about David Goggins. Goggins is a retired Navy SEAL. A lot of you know of him. He's in the same vein as a Chad Wright or Jocko Willink, former SEALs who have gone out and been successful in the world, especially in motivation and business and resilience. And one of the things that it's not Jocko on the brain. One of the things that Goggins talks about is that when you think you're done physically, you're only 40%. You have more in the tank than you think. And this particular challenge, Max Plus One, came from, it was a book. I wish I could remember the guy's name, but he's a runner, entrepreneur, lives in New York City, had heard about Goggins. And this guy was an endurance runner, right? And Goggins is an endurance runner. So he and his wife actually invited Goggins to stay at their house for a couple of weeks for training and things like that. And so I remember reading the book, and they talk about the first day after Goggins gets there, they go out for a dark 100 run, and it's cold and it's been snowing, but they run. Goggins is going to run no matter what. And then when they get back to the house, at some point, I think there's a gym, a makeshift gym or something in the place where this guy and his wife are living. And Goggins says, we're going to do pull-ups, okay? We're going to do 1,000 pull-ups. Well, the guy said, I can't do 1,000 pull-ups. Goggins says, do as many as you can. We'll do them together. And obviously Goggins can do more than this guy, but maybe the guy could do 5 or 6. He says, I can't do 1,000. He says, we're going to, was it 1,000 or 100? But anyway, it was a big number. It was a big number. And the guy got through it. It took maybe hours, but if he even did 1 or 2 at a time and rested his arms, and he kept at it. The idea was that you can do more. So this particular Stoicism challenge was find an activity, whether it's push-ups, sit-ups, pull-ups, squats, whatever. Do as much and as many reps as you can, physically can, where you feel like you can't go any further. Wait 30 seconds and try to top that by 1, if not more. So I did that with sit-ups. I went as many sit-ups as I could until my tummy was screaming. I should have planned it better. It was actually after an F45 session. So I got home and, waited for maybe an hour and then did the challenge. And then I waited 30 seconds and I went at it again. And I was able to go, even though my tummy was screaming in pain, I was able to get at least 2 over what I had done before I just collapsed on the floor. But again, that's a really good lesson, right? That you can do more than you think you can. And again, these little things help build resilience, build the will to survive, the will to win, the will to endure. Another one was make amends, right? If you have a disconnect with somebody, or somebody has wronged you, or maybe you've wronged them, or you both wronged each other, it's making amends, right? And so I thought about a person that I needed to make amends with, and I'm in the process of doing that, because I haven't seen this person for a while. But I will the next time I see this person. There'll be a hug. There'll be, and the other thing that the challenge in holidays is, it doesn't have to be this big dramatic, oh, no, I love you, I love you, I love you. I mean, in some cases, he said it could just be psychological, where if you're separated by distance and you want to do the verbal thing, you know that in your heart of hearts, you no longer feel animosity towards the person, or you don't want revenge, or you don't want to feel that way about the person. And it's a way of saying that life is too short. There's a couple sayings in Latin. There's called memento mori, and Holiday actually carries a coin that says memento mori, and that means you will die. And people think, oh, that's morbid. Well, it depends how you look at it. In this case, the way the Stoics look at it is, like right now, I'm having this broadcast, right? The ancient samurai had a great saying, which is in line with this, that every moment of a life is another step towards death. We're all going to depart from this earth at one point. That's something we all have in common. So, memento mori, in this context means, the person that you are trying to make amends with, or you may not live till tomorrow. So what are you waiting for? But it also extends to the things that we think are so, like the challenges that we have now, whether it's in business or personal, whatever it is. You think back 10, 15 years to challenges that you had back then. Back then, it was when I was in the agency or at Microsoft, the challenges that were hitting me were, not insurmountable, but they were huge, right? And I'm never going to have a challenge like that again. And then you realize, the challenges that you have now are similar to what you had back then, and those challenges help make you stronger for these challenges. But again, memento mori. But that was just one of the things to make amends. Another one was really cool. Now this was a mental one, and this was all about finding a quiet place and counting to 1,000. And people say, well, what's the big deal about that? It's harder than you think. The idea is to count to 1,000 without being distracted. That means your mind is focusing on this alone. Because we're so distracted by so many things, social media, this and that, everything that's going around in the world, that a lot of times it's hard to focus for a lot of people. A lot of people find it hard to focus. This whole idea of multitasking is something I fought for years. If you're ever into productivity like I was and still am, there's no such thing as multitasking. Because when you're working on something and then you get pulled away from that, then this takes a hit. You can't do justice to 2 or 3 things. And people think it's a badge of honor that they can do all these kinds of things at the same time. No. The idea is to focus on one thing, get it done. Bill Gates was and still is a master of that. When he's focused on something, like when he was interviewing me for my job for that 45 minutes, Mike Howard was the only thing that mattered in the world. You could tell. He wasn't shuffling papers, looking at his watch, doing other thing. That was me. At 45 minutes and 1 second, boom, he's off somewhere else. Mike Howard doesn't exist. So this idea, so I went to the backyard. It was an afternoon, relatively quiet, and I concentrated. 1,001, 1,002. And the idea was to keep those numbers visually in my brain. And even though little Kiku, our dog, came out and wanted to play, and I could sense her around here, even if I could sense her, I pulled my mind back to still counting, keep counting, keep counting. And 1,000 is a long time. The other thing they told you about is when you count to, if you get to 500, don't congratulate yourself mentally, because that takes you out of it. Just keep going. And it took me about close to 25 minutes to do that. And again, it was harder than I thought, but it was a good lesson that you can focus, you can concentrate, and you can block things out if you really want to. This one I've actually done twice, because I'm doing another challenge right now called Slay Your Stress. I liked the 21-day Stoicism challenge so much, I signed up for another one, which I'm doing now. But this is a digital Sabbath, they called it. And as you can imagine, we are surrounded, as you know, by iPads and iPods and iPhones and Androids and computers and everything else. So the idea was take a digital Sabbath. You pick 24 hours, and in those 24 hours, you're not looking at your phone and you're not looking at your computer, right? You're taking, because we're wedded to, well, I can't pick it up now because I'm talking to it, but we're wedded to these pocket devices that have all this beautiful information. For me, I'm a news junkie. I like news feeds. I like social media feeds. I like all that kind of stuff. But after a while, your brain gets overloaded with that, and it's actually not healthy for you. There's actually an addiction. One of the things they do is have you, before you start the challenge, go through, if it's Android or iPhone, go through where it tracks your screen time for that day, and multiply it by 24 hours. Multiply it by 7 days, and multiply that by a whole year, and it's amazing the amount of screen time that all of us put in. And it just reiterates, hey, take a break. So for those 24 hours, I took a break, and it was wonderful. I can concentrate more on Janice and Kiku, more mindfulness, reading more of meditations, reading more of the Bible, studying, just observing nature, looking at the mountains around here, just things that you take for granted, but it's also healthy. I wasn't burdened with what was going on in Ukraine or the politics or Trump versus Biden. As citizens, we need to be informed, but we have to control, and that's a big tenet of Stoicism, is there are things you can't control. I can't control what's happening in Ukraine. I can't control the stupidity between Biden and Trump. I can't control crime on the streets. I can't control the ups and downs of the stock market. I can control my reaction to those things, and I can control how much I want to digest. So for each of us, it's different, but we should stay informed, but not to the point where we're just salivating for the next news feed from these 24-hour news cycles. That's what they want. It's like a drug. They want you to observe MSNBC, Fox News all day long, that kind of stuff. And I have to fight that too, right? Even now, I have to fight that, make sure that I'm digesting it in chunks. But it was great, and it was great seeing that phone there in the charger, but I didn't look at it, and it was wonderful. I enjoyed it. I did it again the other day as part of this Slay Your Stress challenge, and I'll do it later on in the year too, on a regular basis. This one was really cool. This was one it wanted to teach you that all the problems that you have on your plate right now, there's nothing new. Anything that's going on in the world, there's nothing new. And so what they had you do is, and they gave you some sources, which is really cool, to look. So the idea was, we're in 2024. Go back to any of the 24 years. So 1924, 1824, 1724, whatever. Find a news article, something significant that happened then, that is parallel to what's going on now. And it was really interesting to go back to some of these. I went back 1824, and I found a Nevada newspaper that's no longer in existence now. But, we think, we got this pandemic, and once in a lifetime thing, which in our case it may be, I don't know. But back in 1824, here in Nevada, they had their pandemic. I think it was called hoof and mouth disease. And it was to the point where Nevada was barring anybody from other states coming in there. Other states were suffering at the same time. And the news articles were talking about how many people were sick and it was spreading and blah, blah, blah. So nothing new, right? But it was interesting to see that people throughout centuries faced the same kinds of issues that you're facing now. So as you come up against an issue at work, maybe a difficult boss, can't get budget, difficult personnel issues, crisis situation, things like that. It should give you some solace knowing that these situations, while they may have their unique variables, they're not new. And so as it helps you mentally and emotionally to handle those situations, you don't just fly off the handle or have all this anxiety when you realize that 20 years from now, someone else will be probably involved in what you're doing, having the same problems and having the same thoughts, right? Because it just, that's the way it goes. So I thought that was really good. And I think the last one was, and this was the very last challenge. And it said, write down, your kind of activities, spell out the last day of your life. Now that was very telling, right? And it's personal for everybody. But if you knew today that was it, what would you do? There are some obvious things. You'd spend as much time with your loved ones. In my case, Janice and Kiku. Probably make sure I be in contact with our daughter Jenny and son-in-law Mike and grandkids and my father-in-law and mother-in-law Earl and Joanne. Those that are closest to me. I would reach out to the closest friends, people who I consider family, and want to spend time with them or reach out with them. I mean, there's a whole host of things. There you may, there could be even some things like I'll have my favorite meal or whatever it is. You kind of list it out, because the idea is not, again, to be morbid, but the idea is to kind of see what your emphasis is. And I think most people, it would be on family, making sure they're taken care of, making sure that the bank accounts are all there and everything, that your family's taken care of. Make sure you let them know how much you love them, because we can go through, a lot of people probably do go through days without saying I love you, or saying it in a very cursory way, when they have to think about what does that mean if one of you wasn't there. And then what are the things that are really important to you? Like, would that business meeting that seems so critical now, or the knucklehead that you're dealing with as a boss or something, would that really mean anything? Or would it be like, yeah, it doesn't mean anything. In the grand scheme of things, it means nothing. And that's another basic tenet of Stoicism. You kind of, and again, hard to do, but you kind of look at every day, live each day as if it were your last day, and that puts things into perspective. It doesn't negate the importance of whatever meetings and business issues or family issues or whatever you're dealing with. Those are still important. You still have to be dealt with. But it also gives you a bit of calmness and pause to sit back and think about how to deal with those issues. So maybe you come up to a better decision. When everybody's running around like chickens with their head cut off, maybe you can stay back. There's another Stoicism quote, Latin quote called amor fati. And amor fati basically means, love your fate, love what's happening, even if it's bad. There was a great story about Thomas Edison back in the day, who, one of his, I think his main factory burned down to the ground. And so a lot of his, whatever experiments he was working on, things, artifacts, probably a lot of personal stuff, burned to the ground. And when I know he communicated to somebody, I can't remember if it was a relative or a friend, but I think it was a relative, and said, hey, come down here, you'll never see a fire like this again. And within a couple of years, he had rebuilt. Not that he was frivolous about it. Well, I'm sure when he was watching his thing burn down, it was traumatic, but he dealt with it the way it's hard to do, but it showed his strength of character, strength of will, because he could do nothing about the fire. So just like you rant and rave in traffic about someone that cuts you off, or the traffic is slow, or there's an accident, there's nothing you can do about it. So why get yourself worked up about it? A basic tenet of Stoicism is to only think about and worry about the things that are under your control. When you do that, first of all, you free yourself from all this other stuff that you can't control. We can't worry about that. It makes you happier, because it gives you actually more room for the happy stuff, because you've put away all the stuff that you can't control. And that's huge. And so I think thinking about every day, what if every day was the last day in your life, and thinking about the fact that whatever happens to you from a fate perspective, whether it's good or whether it's negative, it's going to happen, and you are where you need to be at any given time. and that eventually things will get better. No matter what happens, things will get better. So, I finished that challenge, and I loved it so much. I found this other challenge by Holiday. He's got several of them, and this one's Slay Your Stress. I just want to take it because I've been pretty good. I think I'm pretty good about managing stress over the years. But I can always, like any muscle, you want to keep it strong, and you keep yourself stronger by pushing yourself and lifting your heavier weights if you want your muscles to grow. So I'm doing this, and it's really great. So I think the bottom line in all of this is that all of us are looking for ways to improve and get better physically and mentally, spiritually, and everyone's different. And so Stoicism, Christianity may not be, Buddhism may not be for your cup of tea. But I would ask you and challenge you to take a look at what these things have to offer. And I'd say, number one, just remember that whatever pressures you're facing today are not new. They're not new in history. Just like the example of me looking back to 1824 and there was a pandemic here in Nevada, or in your own life when you're stressed and you're dealing with something, and it's a good thing to think back about 10, 15, 20 years ago. What was I dealing with? Okay, I was dealing with this situation that's similar, and we got through that. Guess what, sports fans? You're going to get through this too. Not that it won't be hard, but you're going to get through it. And again, I can't emphasize this enough. The key to being calm, right? In my case, I know the Bible says be anxious for nothing, right? And that's very similar to a lot of things that Marcus Aurelius and then other philosophers said, right? Why get wrapped around the axle over something you can't control? And so we're humans. We're going to get anxious. We're going to worry. We're going to get panicked. We're going to be stressed. That's a given. But the idea is, you got a lot of people out there that's their DNA. That's their norm. And I'm telling you that should not be the norm. That norm leads to early death or disease. It leads to a lot of physical issues, emotional issues, and where you can live a life where you'll feel that stress, but then you can manage it. You feel that panic, and then, I can manage it, right? You feel that physical issue, you can manage it. Spiritual issue, you can manage it. By just training your mind and training your body and training your spirit to deal with these things, so that you end up having a happier life. Not that you're not going to run into bad things. Life is not like that. It'd be great if it wasn't, but it is. You're going to have a car accident. Hopefully not, but someone's going to bump into you. Or, even little things like you're going to have, in our case, every so often get leaks in the house, because the roofers that they had at the time didn't do a great job. Luckily, we've gone through a whole year without it, but that's just a minor thing. But you're going to have issues that you're going to deal with. But these are tools, and I would encourage you, from a spiritual perspective, I think, again, this is not a religious channel, but for me, for Janice, for our family, for the most part, we're Christians, and we take solace in God and the Bible. But whatever your spiritual bent is, I also think that the practice of Stoicism, at least looking at the major tenets of it, studying the major tenets of Marcus Aurelius, Epictetus, and Seneca, those are the three main ones, really are going to help you out in your modern life. It's amazing how these philosophers of old, eons ago, have words of wisdom that help us in our issues today. So that's just what I wanted to talk about. I wanted to give you sort of what's going on in my life, journey-wise, spiritually, mentally, and physically. And we've got we're readying some really good guests this year. for the podcast. So there's more to come on that, and we'll do some more interesting things, different things, fun things from podcast standpoint, just to keep things fresh. But I encourage you to continue to send your comments, give me suggestions of people you may want me to have on the podcast. It started off with a lot of security type folks, and it's morphed into just a lot of people with a lot of interesting things to say that hopefully will help improve the quality of your life. So until next time, I thank you again for subscribing to the podcast and to the blog. Please check out my books on MikeHowardAuthor.com, and we'll talk to you very soon.